obviously you're not a golfer.
I must have drank me about 15 Dr. Peppers.
Congratulations. How do you feel?
I gotta pay.
We have heard the chimes at midnight, Master Armicello.
You're an inanimate fucking object! You told I'm coming! And hell's coming with me, you hear? Who the fuck has the goddamn gall to call his house on a Tuesday night? God!
All right, what the fuck is up, everyone?
Woo!
Welcome to 3 for 3. It's one of three hosts, Matt Patterson here, along with Jackson Workman and Samuel Haller.
What up?
This week we have a very wide array of movies, starting with a classic, David Lean's Dr. Zhivago, which was Jackson's pick.
Yes, indeed. This was a movie that I'm glad I picked for this podcast because I've been wanting to watch it for a long time. I've watched quite a few David Lean movies this year, and naturally this was my next one that I wanted to see. And if it hadn't been for the fact that if I hadn't picked it for the podcast, I probably would have put it off even longer because it's such a long movie. So picking it for this and knowing that I had to see it by today kind of forced me to just do it. And then once I got in, it was like the quickest 3 hours of my life. I was like, all right, as is the case with David Lean. His movies are so long, but go by so fast because you're just having such a good time. And for those of you who don't know, basic plot is it's a big sweeping romantic epic. It's about a guy named Dr. Zhivago, who is a doctor during the Russian Revolution, in like the late 1910s, early 1920s. And he witnesses the horrors of the revolution as his country is plunged into chaos while he is falling in love with a married woman, even though he's already married. And it's this sweeping epic romance. And yeah, it's an all-time classic. And yeah, I needless to say, fucking loved it. It was just, I mean, there are epics and there are David Lean epics, like two totally different categories here. This man is a god. Like all three of his movies that I've seen this year, this, Lawrence of Arabia, and Bridge on the River Kwai have all just been fucking amazing. And this was just, I mean, I don't even know where to start. Just the direction is fucking immaculate. The cinematography, I gotta give a shout out to this motherfucker, Freddie Young, his cinematographer, who also shot Lawrence of Arabia and a lot of his other movies. I mean, just god tier cinematography. So just some of the most epic, huge, I mean, shots that I've ever seen. Great performances. Omar Sharif plays Dr. Zhivago. He fucking crushed it. So much of the cast. So many great actors: Julie Christie, Alec Guinness, Ralph Richardson. But one I got to give a special shout out to is my man Rod Steiger. I thought he was a real standout. Played such a despicable character in this movie, and just, you know, absolute. That man has more range than almost any actor I've ever seen. I just have to say, every single part I have ever seen him play is completely different than the last one, and he crushes like in this he's playing like an evil Russian like businessman. I've seen him play, you know, a Mexican bandit. I've seen him play a Southern police chief. I've seen him play a gangster from New England. I mean, so many different parts, and each one with the same amount of expertise. I mean, he's really one of the greatest to ever do it. I thought he was a real standout in this. And yeah, just incredibly well written. Also, Robert Bolt, just A-plus screenwriter. I've watched quite a few movies he's written this year. Won an Oscar for the screenplay, well deserved. So I guess those are just the basic thoughts. What do you guys think?
I made the horrible decision of starting this movie at 11 p.m.
Ooh, well, so did I. Interestingly enough, and I didn't finish it till 3.
Yeah, well, I was like really gung ho about the first half, and then when it hit that kind of middle stretch after shit really starts going down,
Mm-hmm.
I just knocked the fuck out.
Oh
So I
no.
had to go back and like the next day watch some and then go through it. And the second half just had such a different tone that it like felt very separated for me. And I wish I had seen it all in one swoop. And I need to start writing these down, but like you talked about the shots and everything. There was a couple of shots in this movie that I saw in a lot of like modern stuff. Like the shot where he's, even though they're completely different scenes, the shot where he's cold and he sees the vision of, I think it was a vision of his Tanya, um and everything, and it's just really far and they're like running away from him, and then he goes after and finds out it's these other people. You could see that even in like Fargo, especially with the scene with the money being buried and stuff like that. And I really got into that, and the music's absolutely wonderful.
Yeah. I got Maurice Jarre absolutely crushed this score. He, again, god tier composer. I've heard a lot of his stuff this year in movies. The main theme was stuck in my head the next day. So that's how you know it's a memorable score, if it actually gets stuck in your head afterwards.
Heart-wrenching final line, like then it was a gift.
Yeah, and that was,
Yeah.
the last, I gotta say, the last 10, 15 minutes of the movie were just, yeah, gut-wrenching.
Powerhouse. Yeah.
The scene where, I'm just gonna say it, spoiler alert, whatever. The scene where he dies on the tram while he's like trying to get to her, that took me out. That killed me. I was just like, man, that and just Omar Sharif's acting in that scene was so fantastic. Just the way he, played him so frail, and just he's trying to call out to her, but he just can't, because he's having a heart attack. That was just crushing. And the added insult of really the most crushing aspect of it. I mean, that was sad. The way his story ended was really sad. The most crushing aspect of the story to me was the fact that she did, Julie Christie's character did such a good job of building this life and getting away from Rod Steiger and like overcoming the trauma that he had inflicted on her at that young age and really maturing as a person. And I, so much credit to her acting, because she did such an amazing job at the beginning of the movie of completely selling it as a naive like 17-year-old, and then for the rest of the movie being visibly much more mature as like, a woman in her 20s who seemed like a very realistic older version of that character. And she did such a good job of like building this life for herself and getting away from that and growing as a person. And for her to basically end in the same place she started, where she's back with that fucking creep, but she's doing it for the sake of her child and for the sake of like her freedom. And it's crushing that, like, I don't know, she's tragically just back in these circumstances. And then you learn in the end she probably died in a gulag while that piece of shit left the daughter behind during an attack. I was like, oh, that's just so crushing. I mean, just the tragedy of it, where, but I think it's very realistic, because, in that time period, you hear lots of stories, whether it's from Russia or lots of other countries, you know, you hear lots of stories about how people of that era in certain countries, like, they had to suffer that way in order for the children to have a better future, which is what you see happens at the end with the daughter. It's like she's going to have a better future, because of what her parents basically had to go through. And I think that's a theme that, resonates a ton, and is, very true to life. And one question I want to know what you guys thought. What do you think, if there was any, what do you think was the symbolic significance of the balalaka throughout the movie? The guitar.
That's a really good question. Yeah, no,
I,
because yeah, they did bring that up a couple times. Like,
When he put her on that
Um,
thing, put it on her shoulder.
mm-hmm.
yeah,
Because that was something I was like, this signifies something. I don't know what it is, but because it was the through line throughout the movie. Every time they were forced to move, you know, they very intentionally had a scene or a shot where that thing was prominently displayed throughout the whole thing. and it was what started and ended the movie. You know, I guess in the end, the main significance of it was her being able to play it with no training and it being a gift is the clear, you know,
But also, I think it has to do with just their heritage and what they've
mhm.
lost and
Yeah,
everything
I mean,
is something that stayed true through that cultural.
That's probably
oh,
right. It's probably the
and
fact that no matter what they go through, no matter what hardships they go through, that thing is still there. You know, it's still that piece of their heritage still endures no matter what they go through. Um,
yeah, I was gonna say, because like I guess like the poetry was kind of controversial for the Russia, like in Russia at the time.
mhm.
And so the creativity or like the slight like, and you know what I mean? That's what it could be too, because she's also like able to
True,
sing, and that could also incite revolution.
true.
And
And
so there's
again,
that
just the
promise.
fact that they're trying so hard to get rid of all their personal belongings and stuff, and they manage to keep that kind of as an act of defiance itself, you know, throughout the story. But it's clear at the end that her being able to play it with no training, just like he was able to, and just like his mother was able to, is the clear signifier that she is, in fact, you know, his daughter.
Yep.
Which was such a nice kind of bow on the movie there. And I just got to say, too, I've seen a lot. Very, Sam, your review is very accurate, very bleak. Because, I mean, for obvious reasons, but also just, man, I'm telling you, I've seen a lot of movies where, you know, with these kinds of themes, where it's like, um, themes of like, you know, power struggles and, you know, revolution and you know the good guys becoming the bad guys, or because Tom Courtney's character at the beginning, it seems like, oh, he's just trying to stand up for the people, but then he becomes just an absolute monster in the second
Yep.
half of the movie. And that surprised me. That got me with the reveal at the end of the first act when they show like, yeah, he's Strelnikov, he's the guy. Um, but I've never seen it as chillingly portrayed as in this movie. I mean, something about it just really struck me where,
I love. Sorry,
oh, go
keep going.
ahead.
I just love the aspect that like when at the end when he was found on this walking down the street and like had no didn't hide who he was as a person is as described to Zhivago is like just really interesting how like these people evolved in such these different kind of ways throughout the movie and everything, but like they were true to who they were in all of their final moments. And I think that that was like to hear that his character did not hide who he was as a person and admitted like his legal name and everything was really powerful.
True. And that was something I wasn't expecting to hear was he kind of in the end abandoned the whole Strelnikov identity and was going back to find her because they said they arrested him like 5 miles from her house. That's where they got him. But just the chillingness of, you know, it just really struck me again more than it ever has in any other movie I've seen like this, where just the whole with him and with the soldiers later on when they abduct him in the woods, just the whole like the personal life is dead, you know, like the personal life doesn't matter. Like the cause is what matters, you know, the party is what matters. This is what matters. I'm just like to the point where they're just willing to like abduct, like take him from his family for years or in his case, abandon his wife and all this stuff. And I'm just like, man, what are you doing this for if not for the personal life? Like, what's the point? It was just so chilling the way they portrayed it. I was just like, just the absolute, just like lack of feeling for anything and just seeing the village burn down. And Matt, that was a good review. That was a very good quote, very good line. Your point there, village. I was
Yeah, I
like,
thought that was killer. I was like, damn.
yeah, I was like, win for Robert Bolt with that line. That was a great one. But yeah, and again, I just David Lean is just so good at. I mean, all the scenes were so well directed, so just visually striking. Like whatever was going on, like as written, was already usually very like impactful. But I mean, God, those shots and just you know the cut. Like I love the scene where Rod Steiger takes him aside and talks to him and convinces him to let her leave, and just the stark, just blue colors, just like really kind of encapsulating just the frozen deadness of their situation and their environment and everything. And just also, quick question: what did you guys think the significance of the wolves was?
I definitely thought that it just kind of showed the mentality of what Russia kind of at, and how like these people, like especially the party scene where he gets shot earlier on, I think really showed the separation of class. For a lot of like, these people are living in these cozy, warm things, and then you just juxtapose that to Omar Sharif hiding the pieces of wood for fire under his coat while these people are taking his things out of his house and everything.
Right.
And I think it's really this like pack mentality keeps following you and keeps chipping away at pieces of you, and because that's kind of like the way that wolves hunt is, like they attack from all different corners and everything. And I think that's something that he struggled with a lot, and why they kind of showed that.
That's probably true, because I thought that was an interesting little thing. Like towards the end, where they're in the house and you keep seeing the wolves. I'm like, this means something. There's some symbolism here.
For Russia, she's
Yeah,
coming for you.
exactly. He feels like a lone wolf, probably in a lot of ways. Also, I would feel like he's scared just like they are.
One last thing I'd want to bring up real quick though is the set design, which was also like awesome. But the frozen house when they go in and everything's just frosted over is fucking. I was
yeah.
like, that is nice.
It apparently also it won a lot of technical Oscars, including for set design. So
That makes sense.
It
That shit
deserves
was,
it. Yeah,
I mean, all the whole set, all the sets were on point, but that
I mean,
one
yeah,
especially-
they're massive and very well staged and very yeah, that the Frozen house in particular, yeah, it was like very well done, very realistic looking. A lot of it was just again, David Lean, it goes without saying, technically flawless, just huge
the
in
Epic
scope,
King.
which really helps. But yeah, to sum up, yeah, Zhivago was a fucking plus. Shout out to the GOAT David Lean and just everyone involved, just crushing it at their jobs. Um I can't say enough about just yeah, again, just like Lawrence of Arabia, just the quickest 3 hours I ever spent watching a movie. Just flew by. I was so enthralled. I enjoyed it so much. Just really really fantastic. Just it's I see why it's a classic. I see why it's so beloved. I think it was just one of the best movies I've ever seen. I would say it's funny, each of the three movies in its own way has its own distinction. This was the best, and then the other two movies have their own distinctions though. But final thoughts from you guys?
I really enjoyed it. I look forward to rewatching it sometime whenever I do have time, because Stuart wanted to watch it, but it wasn't cold enough for them outside. They were like, I need to be in the cold kind of like mood. And so I'm probably gonna rewatch it in December or January or whatnot. And I think watching it all the way through is really gonna click it a lot more. Because I think, which I feel weird saying this, but I think watching wise, this was, out of the three, this was at the bottom in terms of me like being engaged. But I think that was my fault, not the movies in any way, shape, or form.
Right. I mean, that can definitely hamper an experience for sure. But especially when I shouldn't have picked one this long, but
Oh no, I am more than happy for a 3 hour movie.
I will say this: bring back overtures, damn it.
Yeah,
I've watched a lot of movies
Fucking
this year
solid.
with overtures and intermissions, and it's like, hey, I'm for it.
Yeah, it's different.
But all right. So which one?
you feeling like, what's your opinion on the movie a little bit to wrap
What?
up on? You didn't
Oh,
express final thoughts
well,
on.
I mean, it's a classic. It's an epic. I think I probably was a little less like completely like, there are times where I kind of tuned out for a second, had to go back into it, but I think it was a great movie. No, I really liked it though. I'm glad I saw it too, because I feel like I also would not have watched this movie if we had not chosen it like anytime soon.
Yeah.
Anytime soon. So at least I checked that off the whole AFI's 100 greatest list.
Right.
It's literally it's a staple, and thank God we watched it because I agree with
Yeah.
you. It would have been a while till I checked it out.
Well, all right. So which one shall we move on to next?
Well, I figured we'd go to Sam's next just to save the worst for the best for last. I mean,
Okay.
Okay, well,
we
The
did that last time.
Fall, which is the Fall Guy but better. Period.
Much
Here
better.
It is actually. I was surprised how similar it was when I didn't think about that.
for the audience, it's about a stuntman played by Lee Pace. Well, it's not really about it's about a stuntman, but it's told from the perspective of this little girl, who one of the best actresses I've seen in a minute. Like I was enamored with how well she was performing. But Lee Pace plays a stuntman back in the early days of film and everything, and he gets injured and is pretty much paralyzed from the waist down, and so he's bedridden the whole movie. And she's in this hospital because she has a broken arm, and because she loves throwing oranges at priests, and fell while trying to get the oranges to throw at a priest, and she basically runs into him through one way or another, and he starts telling her these fantastical stories. He went on a little story based off of her name earlier at the beginning, and then he was like, "Well, I have an epic for you set in India," which kind of pissed me off because 90% of that story was not in India. But anyway, he tells her this story, and it's told through this visual representation of you're put in the story that he's telling, and it goes through the motions of him coming to terms with being paralyzed and her trying to understand the world and understand why people are so angry and also why people are treating people certain ways, and how basically just kind of growing up through the story. And I really loved it. It was
Oh yeah.
fucked.
Yeah.
Like really dark at points.
Yeah, I would agree with your assessment. It was very dark.
Yep. So I was gonna say it's amazing, like amazingly shot. Every shot's like awesome, but especially in the beginning, like the freaking keyhole shot with the upside down horse and the sunlight through the keyhole was amazing.
Oh yeah. Yeah, wow, I forgot about that until you just brought it up.
Yeah, I mean,
I
this
was
is like one of those. What were you gonna say, Sam?
I told Matt I paused the movie and had Stuart come in just so I could rewind and show them that scene because I was like, I don't know how they did that, but
Yeah.
it's wonderful.
The
Yeah.
whole movie was absolutely gorgeously shot. A lot of insane visuals. It was
Directed
definitely, like I said, most of each of the movies had its own distinction. Dr. Zhivago was my favorite of the three. This one is the one that emotionally resonated with me the most and was the saddest. This movie fucked me up beyond belief. I was just an emotional wreck watching a lot of this movie. It was so sad. There were so many parts where I was like this close to just breaking down crying. It was just
when
like
she was running in there thinking that he had died and it was the only
my heart, like when she opened that curtain and we saw that he was still alive, I was sitting in this chair. I literally fell back in this chair and said, Jesus fuck. Thank God. And yeah, it was a roller coaster. And here's what's interesting about this movie. When you picked it last week, and I looked it up, and I saw it was from Tarsum Singh, I got a little nervous because he has the reputation for being a very kind of pretentious style over substance director. That's what pretty much all of his movies have. He's a guy who did The Cell, and
I like the cell.
that
Or we
movie has the
have-
reputation for being like all of his movies have the reputation for being like very, very like visually interesting, but has like no depth whatsoever story wise. So I was like, okay, we'll see how this goes. I gotta give it to the man. This was a fucking amazing movie. I mean, like he crushed it with this one. Just
He co-wrote it with one of the Gilroys.
yeah, Dan Gilroy. Yeah,
From-
and you could be right, Sam. that maybe Tony helped him, but I want to give him credit on this one.
Yeah.
On Nightcrawler, that's a different story, but on this one, I want to give him some credit here because he can be a good writer. I don't know if either of you have seen Andor, but he wrote on that show. He did some very good episodes, so I know he can be a good writer sometimes, but when he really tries. But yeah, I just got to say it was just the narrative, both narratives, like the real life narrative in the hospital, I thought was incredibly just emotional, incredibly just relatable with just what he was going through. And just the connection between them was just that was the heart of the movie, obviously, was the connection between the two of them. And then the fantasy story again, I was so invested. The end part when they're storming the city, I was so sad. That was just terrible watching them all go out one at a time.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
like, it's even more devastating because I really thought that they were going to find a way to change the narrative to make it so that they all lived in the end, but no, it was
Not in his story.
not in his story. And the ending part where he's finishing up the story was just like, oh my God, where he's still unable to, you know, like deal with his pain and he's still unable to. And the way she just says, I don't want you to die. I love you. I want you to live and shit. And that's what finally gets through to him. Just, hits you right in the fucking feels
Like,
all the way.
the movie's chugging along and you don't realize how much it's ramping up, but then once it hits that like scene where she has hurt herself again and he's beside her telling her all these horrible things and how what his story is doing and everything, I think is really where that story just pushes, and you don't realize how tense you are until the scene's over and you have that kind of like release of like
Yeah, like kind of for me, when it starts getting really intense is when, first of all, when he takes the pills in the first place. But throughout that entire sequence,
that manipulation of her like
I know
get
that was
these
really fucked up.
ORFIN or PHIN3. You want
Yeah,
to be able.
which was a clever. I read that apparently the little actress, apparently that was a real mistake she made when she read it, like on the set, and they incorporated it into the script because they realized, like, oh, that would be such a clever thing if she misinterpreted the E as a three. Um, and yeah, you said it, Sam, and I gotta say it too. Shout out to that actress, Katinka Untaru, I think is her name. I can't remember. I mean, like not even just for a child actress, for an adult actress. I mean, she was going toe to toe with Lee Pace and everyone else in the movie. I mean, incredible. And she couldn't have been, she looked like there's no way she could have been older than like 6 or 7 years old. For her to give such a like,
That's
I
what's
mean, raw, impactful, emotionally resonant performance like that, and really like seemingly grasp the material that she had at such a young age. It's incredibly impressive.
it kind of make me think about a lot of Guillermo del Toro's earlier work, like Chronos and
Pan's Labyrinth.
Backbone, and even especially Pan's Labyrinth. Yeah, it just the way it was shot and just kind of colored and whatnot. It really made me think of him and that fantastical element that he is so well known for.
Right. And yeah, I really
Man,
thought that. What were you gonna say?
I was gonna say like well like and the good part about this is like they actually go for it every time on like when they do the story that there's no like pulling any punches or anything. They actually like it's
I was
like
gonna say I like that.
and
I like that the
practical.
story, the fantasy story, had a consistency to it, but at the same time, they did acknowledge the fact that it was a made up story where the details could change at any moment, but it didn't feel like cheap or like they were just changing it to fit whatever they wanted. It felt natural because it's like, well, that's what this is. It's a guy telling a basically a bedtime story to a kid. So like when
Pretty sure the
she
bandit was not Lee Pace at the beginning, and then
it
when she
wasn't, and I didn't realize that, but it was a different actor, yeah. And she again introducing her as a character halfway through the movie or halfway through the story, like putting her in the little sack and saying, "Ah, yes, you're my daughter from another marriage." Like that didn't feel unearned. That felt like, yeah, that feels right within the parameters of like what this story is, like, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
she's a character now too. Like that makes sense. And yeah, I just really thought that the whole thing was very, very um emotionally resonant and super well. Again, as is the case with him. Another impressive shot was when they go into the Green Valley, and it's just like kind of a panning shot of the valley, and then they pan down a little bit, and all those people like come up out of the ground. I was like, damn, that was an impressive shot. Like, wow. And the mystic coming out of the tree,
Oh, I
and
love that part so
and
much.
one of my favorite moments, just the edit of the shot of the butterfly, and then it fades into like the shot of the island, like the super wide shot of the island that's shaped like the butterfly. I was like, that was fucking amazing. Like visually just spectacular, for sure.
Yeah. I
Uh,
mean, when I saw Sam pick this, I was like, I did not expect to watch this movie ever again because the first time I saw it, I was like, this is amazing. I don't think I need, I don't want to like ruin that, but this honestly made it better. So,
yeah, I was telling him before you got on, they apparently in some select theaters are going to do like a theatrical re-release of the movie. And I
oh, yeah.
said, as much as I would want to see this in a theater and see it again, I don't know if I'm emotionally ready to watch this a second time yet. It's gonna be a while before I'm ready because this just killed me. But yeah, it's one of those movies where it's just like, I don't know, it captures your imagination in such a it's weird because it's like it's so imaginative and whimsical at parts, but also just so absolutely devastating and raw in other parts. It blends those two sensibilities together so well in a way that I feel like a lot of movies wouldn't be able to do. And
Yeah,
I give it immense props for that.
that's where like my letterbox review of every time this movie upset me in a certain way, it just kind of like corrected that and took me in a whole different direction and just kind of was like, well, you're wrong and this is why, and then just went even further and higher. And the scene that in particular that really stands out to me was when they were raiding the band of slaves and everything and the horses that are going back and forth along that. I was just like, this is so interesting. And I didn't expect a heist to just like pop up in the middle of it, but it was cool.
Yeah, and I love the moment at the end where he the bride lady, after he's killed the bad guy, she's like, this was just a test, to see if you really love me, and now, you something like you can have my heart or whatever. And he says, okay. He throws the locket off the ledge. He's like, go get it. Like, and she says, follow, I can follow my heart now. He's like, all right, go follow it. I was like, what a great moment. Like, because again parallels the real life thing where he's just like, I don't care about you anymore. You're not my reason for living at this point. It's the kid. But yeah, just all around great. And again, just like the way that each of the characters in the fantasy story, you were so endeared to them. I just thought that was really well done. Even when some of them didn't necessarily have a ton of lines, they still made you so endeared to each one of them. Like when they die, you're so sad about it,
I was so fucking mad that his bombs never went off. And then when it finally did, I was just like, oh, this is this is wonderful.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And
I
I
don't know
mean,
if
when you
I've
start a movie with presented by Spike Jones and David Fincher, you kind of gotta just expect the best.
yeah, if they put their names behind this, then yeah, it must be something worth watching
That's a wild combo too.
Yeah.
for
You
sure.
kind of can see the inspirations from both in the movie a little bit.
Yeah, especially Spike Jones, but
Yeah.
with just trippy
It made
visuals
me
and
think a
shit.
lot about what his Where the Wild Things Are.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Also the sequence where it was like stop motion for a minute after she fell, that was pretty trippy.
Yeah, the stop motion was lit.
Hmm. But to sum up our thoughts on the fall, uh,
Wonderful movie.
Thumbs up.
fucking amazing.
That
Yeah.
opening shot with the train going across and all the like,
Spitting out the fucking smoke.
yeah,
I
every
have to say also that piece of music they used throughout the movie is still stuck in my fucking head. The Beethoven music that is still in my head as we speak. Has
And
been stuck there for days.
sometimes that song is like very cheesy when it's in a movie, but it really connected.
I think it really was useful. I think it like, you know, and I was worried when they started playing it at the beginning. I was like, are we just going to use this, you know, in a generic kind of way? But no, throughout the whole thing, I thought it helped complement the emotions of the scene.
Yeah. And
But yeah,
one other song or part where they're dancing and they're talking, and then the song in the background, the chanting is just the dialogue being chanted back, like repeated.
I didn't catch
You guys
that.
notice that?
No.
Yeah, when they're dancing, and there's a part, it's literally like they're talking, and then in the background, the chanting is just the dialogue repeated, but kind of in a sing-songy thing. And when they say the googly line, the chanting is just googly, 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 googly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't
I
catch
was just
that.
laughing at that. I was like, I didn't notice that the first time. And I was like, but this movie can be silly and then also like just play it off like really well.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Um, well, gents, I think
All
it's
right,
time
we're
to
on
move
to
on.
Welcome home,
so
Roscoe Jenkins.
all right. So welcome home, Roscoe Jenkins. The plot of the movie is Martin Lawrence is a talk show host, kind of like Dr. Philish. And he's like created this self-help book, The Team of Me. And he is going home for the weekend to introduce his fiance, uh, one of the contestants on Survivor,
Yeah.
which I love that
Winner
detail.
of Survivor, sorry,
Um,
winner.
winner of Survivor, yes, because of him. And they are like LA hotshot people going back to their, city folk or their rural, country, folk homes kind of thing. Hmm?
I think it's Tennessee.
Kind of, yeah,
I think it's
definitely the
Louisiana.
country. Yeah,
Oh, okay, it could be.
I think might have been, yeah. Um, where he is, of course, treated just like he was when he left,
Fish
much
out.
to the surprise of him or the chagrin of him and surprise of his fiance. And then throughout the movie, you kind of realize that what made him the way he was, and the whole family dynamic of meeting everybody. Of course, with the talents of Monique,
Eek.
Michael Clarke Duncan, the late great Michael Clarke Duncan, probably my favorite part, one of my favorite parts about the movie. Mike Epps, and the late great James Earl Jones, who
Rest.
also was he was the heart of the movie for sure. He definitely carried all the very sincere scenes. Um, but it's also a really funny movie and just kind of light, and you can just turn your brain off. Goddamn, why
I,
can't we start with Access Hollywood uh clips all the time in a movie just to tell you who they are?
I need to just go ahead and get this out before I forget it. Michael Clark Duncan carrying that like pack on his shoulder is possible. Him running at the speed of light with that
Like,
shoulder is one of the most dominatingly like I am physical kind of like ways of depicting that without even stating it.
yeah.
I have to
It's
say before I forget, most unrealistic thing in any movie I've ever seen is taking a punch from Michael Clark Duncan directly to the face and your head still being on your shoulders.
yeah.
How was the
Um,
welts they did for everyone would look the
Oh,
same?
it, I thought at first that the welts were like him eating meat again, and so he had like holes on his forehead. But then when they swell up to those giant like welts, I was like, oh, it's from the hits. But I
yeah.
was really wild depiction of like eating meat again, and then I realized. But
Yeah.
Well, so here's what I'll say. First of all, um, as I said, each movie has its own distinction. Dr. Zhivago was my favorite. The Fall was the one that was the most emotionally resonant, and made me the saddest. This was the one that surprised me the most. Um,
oh,
it I, it grew on me. I'll just say it.
yeah,
Now I'm not saying it was good by any means, but it did grow on me because I'll say this. I felt like I was watching two movies. I felt like I was watching a really shitty comedy and a pretty decent like family dramedy movie. Like the comedy scenes in this were fucking horrendous. I mean, just not the least bit funny, bottom of the barrel, just trash. But then the more like, but like the character development and like the plot stuff and the more like kind of serious scene, I was vibing with that. Like, was it fantastic? Maybe not. Maybe it was a lot of it was kind of cliched, but damn it, I was vibing with it. I was like,
Really
and
think
there were, go ahead.
that hoop where he does not help his son and then does
I
the race.
literally, I was sitting in this chair, and when he dropped his son, I literally like yelled out loud, "What the fuck?" I was
But they
like,
it
what are you doing?"
became predictable in the sense that like you know where it's gonna go, but the resolution really still hit. And I think that's where I was also really happy with the ending,
Well,
because it could have just gone into that trope and just completely hit the brakes, but it pushed.
yeah, I think again, like, but even in that moment, like you're expecting him to just plow right through everybody, including his son, and win the race for himself. But it was like, again, they did it in a way that you weren't necessarily expecting it, or at least I wasn't, where like him actually going to the trouble of stopping and helping him and then dropping him and going on. That was what was so shocking about it. I was just like, oh my God, like, how could you do that? And again, like a lot of the beats, like a lot of the moments between him and his crush, I was fucking with those scenes. Like when they're sitting by the lake and talking, and when they're sitting in the kitchen and talking, and they're talking about like,
It's followed up by the dog fucking scene.
yeah, but see, here's the thing. I gotta say, the cast of this movie also are all really pulling their weight. Martin Lawrence, he seemed like he was doing this for a check for most of the movie, but most of them, like James Earl Jones was great. Michael Clarke Duncan was probably my favorite one in the movie. Monique was crushing it. The girl who played the bitchy fiance was crushing it. The whole
Cedric
cast
the
was really
Entertainer, I forgot
Cedric the
about him.
Entertainer was crushing
Yeah.
it. Everybody was when he came in, I was
And
like,
Mike
okay,
Epps.
say what?
Mike Epps was, I haven't seen him in so long. I was just like okay with it no matter what he said.
Here's what I was gonna say. They were all killing it. Mike Epps was my least favorite part of this movie. He was a scene wrecker because every single time they were like having a serious moment that I was like vibing with, he immediately just came in and wrecked it. Like when they're in the kitchen talking and they're just like, "Oh, come on now. Who would ever want to be with me?" And then he just comes in, give me some booty duty. I'm just like fucking way to just wreck what was a really kind of nice scene that I was into. And then when they're by the lake again, it's just like, oh yeah, well, that's the reason why my family and I aren't getting along very well. And then he comes in again and starts making jokes with the dog, and I'm just like, motherfucker, why are you trying to wreck every scene in this movie? And again, most of what he was saying was not funny. Like that, one of the worst bits in the movie was the scene with him and Monique in the shower. I was just like, not only
I
is
could not
this
believe they did that.
not only is this horrendously unfunny, but like it's the fact that this has gone on for 5 minutes when it should have ended after like one is just really getting on my nerves. But
Did he offer
again, like,
he offered a piece of gum, right?
uh,
Like when he
I,
was walking out, he offered her something. I think it was gum. And I'm just like,
probably.
why?
oh yeah, yeah,
Why?
I don't know. I
yeah,
mean, this is some of these movies. It's like you just, like you said, you got to take it one moment to the next and just be like, okay.
yeah. I just
But
again like I think that and so look, some of the bits I will give like most of the jokes I thought were really bad. But which is why the first half of the movie I wasn't vibing with as much because as soon as they get to the house, it's nothing but joke, 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 and it's all really unfunny, and it's just they're shoving the comedy right in your face. And then once they kind of get that out of their system, it calms down and it's more focused on the character stuff. Um,
I
but I
really
will
like
say one funny gag was I love when Monique was telling the story, like telling the flashbacks, and she was like, and I was devastated for him, and it shows her in the flashback laughing her ass off at him. I was like, okay, that was funny. And the constant her putting her ear up to the wall and listening, that was funny. I was like,
I really like
okay.
her
I,
mispronouncing the name of his fiance the whole time, personally. I can get
Oh
how that can
yeah.
be tiring, but I really enjoyed it.
I like
Yeah.
the scene like where they're playing craps and then they start fighting and then all the women are in the kitchen just drinking wine while they're just get like
Some
fighting at the same
expensive ass fucking
Huh?
wine.
That fight was
Yeah.
insane. That was like, I don't know, that was a well choreographed fight, I gotta say.
As
Like,
someone who cooks catfish at my job, seeing that pan of catfish go flying in the air was genuinely distressing to me.
and also during that scene, a really funny joke that was very quick, but I thought was very funny was when they're fighting and they're like stumbling through the hallway and they go past the parents and the mom just like rather than how like you think she's gonna be like, what are you doing? But she just goes, ah damn, they've been playing craps again.
Yep.
She already knows. I was like, okay, that was funny.
a, a subtle moment in that moment that I did like with Mike Epps was him walking up with all the money that they left there and counting it when he comes into the scene to give his 2 cents.
I
But
didn't catch that.
yeah, he had the stack of money in his hand and he was counting to see how much money he had picked up off the floor. Even though they didn't show it, I was just like, you know that he stole that money from what was there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did think it was a pretty satisfying ending too, like with the whole, I was like, that was tied it all together pretty
It
well.
was a little, it was a
And
little
cliche.
cliched, but I mean, again, like a lot of the moments in the movie, some of them are kind of cliched, but again, like heartfelt. So
I'm
it's
thinking of
like,
James Earl Jones mustache in the flashbacks. Really got
yeah,
it
he gave him a
really got me.
mustache and tried to cover up his gray hair.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I also thought there were a couple of scenes, I just gotta say, that I thought it surprised me. I was like, wow, that's a really like the scene where he's yelling at them at the end of the race and James Earl Jones and him are having that confrontation. I thought that was really well done. I was very surprised when Cedric had a turnaround. I didn't think he would. I thought they would stay rivals until the end of the movie. And when he says like, I don't know, that felt earned to me. Like him saying like that line that Martin Lawrence had, I thought hit hard, where he goes like, you know, he had to lose his dad, so then I had to
Why'd I have
lose
to lose
mine. I
mine?
was like, damn, that line actually went hard. And so it felt earned when Cedric was then like, ah, shit, man, I never thought about it that way. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, And again, another line that I thought hit really hard was when he and James Earl Jones are in the shed looking at the table, and he's just like, yeah, so it's like, well, having family and friends around to help you, that's the lesson you should be teaching your son. You don't want him to think that that's not true. And Martin Lawrence just goes, some kids learn that on their own, dad. Like, I was like, I had to rewind that. I'm like, there's no way a line that hard was just in this movie. I was like, damn, that was good. Like, again, like subtle character development like that I appreciated, where it was just like not necessarily stating it out loud. It really surprised me how good it was at doing stuff like that. And
Whether or not you liked it or not, the fact that there was footage during the credits just tickled me.
I,
And
I was gonna ask if you guys watched that like all the way
I
through.
watched part of it.
I'm
About
so
halfway through, I stopped. I was like, okay, I get it. This is going on too long, but
The one joke that actually made me laugh out loud from that, there was one that made me kind of chuckle, and the one that made me just like laugh out loud was Michael Clarke Duncan. Did you get to his part
are you
where
talking
he's
about when he's
cursing?
talking about tasering his kids?
Yes.
Yeah, that was fucking great.
That one made me laugh out loud with the cursing. I
And it
was like,
really
damn, I can't believe they saved that joke for the
great
credits.
It's
job
funny
of
because they portray him as like this kind of nice father, family man for most of the movie, and then he's like admitting to like tasing his children.
He's like, yeah, I fuck him up.
Tag team him.
You're gonna take the question. You're gonna take out the trash now, and they're just like,
I really appreciated how like the scene where the race happens like could have been very boring, and I think it really got you like energized. And like when he was like hanging from the tree, and I was like, you could just fucking just drop and start back over. Like he didn't, and everything. I was like, it got me like invested, and that's what really mattered to me in that scene rather than just it happening.
And that's the thing too that I realized at the beginning, because I was sitting there and I was like, okay, these jokes aren't funny. The plot is kind of simplistic, and it's a Malcolm D. Lee movie, so I just expected the worst. But I kind of the moment that I started to realize that I should be giving it more credit is I was like, okay, but like I am invested in these characters at this moment. Like, I am invested in the rivalry between Martin Lawrence and Cedric. Like, if Cedric was getting under my skin and really like making me want Martin Lawrence to win, and like, you know, the with him and James Earl Jones, like their dynamic, I was like, okay, I gotta admit, and whether or not he was going to get with the crush, I was like, I am invested in seeing where this is going to go. So I should be giving this more credit. Like, it's doing its job in that sense, at least. And then that continued to grow as it went along. And that the race scene, again, I was very invested in who was going to win the race. I really wanted Martin Lawrence to win. And then I was invested in when he wasn't helping his son. I was like, you dick, like, how could you do that? Like, yeah, you won the race, but at what cost? And there were just all these moments where I found myself, I was like, okay, like, I got to give it to you. And again, the end was pretty predictable, but again, I liked how a lot of the characters did have their own kind of full circle moments. Like, whether it was Martin Lawrence learning his lesson, or Cedric kind of learning his lesson and crying at the end and realizing how appreciative he was to be a part of the family, or even the little moment about halfway through of Michael Clarke Duncan being like, yeah, I could have been a football player, but it wasn't in God's plan for me, you know, like, and Martin Lawrence is like, well, what do you mean? Like, you know, you could have made it. He said, I did make it. I got a great kids. I got a great family. Like, you think just because you're famous, that means you made it? Like, what do you have other than money, you know? I'm like, okay, like, again, maybe not the most original shit ever, but like, I was vibing with it.
Yeah. I'm glad to hear that though, because I was kind of like, when you were like, oh, I'm not sure if I'm gonna like this. I was like, you know, I remember it being a pretty good movie, but I did not remember anything but the one scene with the confrontation at the end of the race. That's the only scene I remembered from the movie. So when I rewatched it, it was kind of nice because I was like, oh yeah, I definitely have seen this, but
And
it's kind of coming back to me like slowly.
Yeah. A funny thing I realized while watching it, I remembered that Malcolm D. Lee is actually Spike Lee's cousin.
Really?
And I think it's very interesting that a big part of the plot of this movie is the main character is the fuck up cousin who has a much better cousin who does everything better than him and is seen as the golden one of the family. And he's the one who can't do anything right. I was like, I wonder where he got this inspiration from.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't think about that.
True to life.
Crazy.
But and the similarities to this in Girls Trip. Girls Trip opens the exact same way, where it's like Trip. Of the news footage of them explaining who the main character is.
Now you need to watch Girls Trip.
Yeah, I know.
And Girls Trip, also the main character is like a TV host, like self-help person who has a shitty fiance who they have to learn to be better by the end. And who's like reconnecting with her friends in that movie and the family in this one. And I'm just like, well, Malcolm D. Lee, he knows his tropes that he likes to go with.
Yep.
I will kill you both if you ever make me rewatch that movie. I will actually. That's
my collection for next week.
I will actually put contracts out on you and kill you.
Getting horror movies started earlier.
Oh God. But I'm glad that went well. And Jackson, just one more thing to add. You were mentioning character development. And I feel like there was just one really underdeveloped character in the whole movie. And that was the guy who played his agent. Who was that though?
Yeah, who was that actor?
Actor's name?
I don't see some more of that person, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, apparently
he's a guy who just seems like
actually
a jerk off, if you know what I mean.
Well, I read up that apparently he had more filmed, but they cut it out because he was so bad.
Yeah, it makes sense because it was very random for him to just have that one little scene at the beginning and never show up again. I was like, why was he in this?
I know why Matt chose this movie. Oh,
I was like, I didn't remember him at all in the movie, and then when I looked it up online, it was like the first in there. But I was like, what? And then he is literally like the first person you see, pretty much.
Pretty much.
It's like Martin Lawrence and then him, and you're like, whoa.
Yeah, he's there at the very beginning. But
you know,
yeah, I gotta say,
that camera crew never showed up.
The what?
The thing of their
that was weird how they built that up so much.
They could have explained it, but I missed that.
Well, they filmed the wedding or the reception or whatever at the end.
Okay.
But it was odd how they built that up so much and there was not really a payoff to that. Because they
Mhm.
built that up like it was going to be such a major kind of like, why are you mentioning the camera crew? And like it never really had a payoff. But
They could have even like taken the credit footage and had like outtake footage of the anniversary party with the footage of that they filmed, or random footage they filmed throughout the week, and they did not. So I was
yeah, that was odd. That was, yeah, definitely kind of a thing that didn't really have a payoff at all. But I love that the dog rejected the fiance at the end. That was also so I was like, even the dog hates you. Wow, like you're really terrible. And I was literally just sitting there the whole movie counting. I'm like, when is the scene when the dogs fuck? Like, when is that
And
coming?
then they open the door and they're just laying
I was
there.
like, all right, there it is. I was like, how long did that take? An hour and 9 minutes. Okay. They waited a while. But
But
yeah,
yeah.
I think all three movies were really solid. I enjoyed things from all three of them, and I think all three are like something that, like we said, would never be mentioned in the same breath, but it's really cool to get to watch them all.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's kind of the good thing about this show is we can have a wide range of films to choose from. And yeah, very pleasantly surprised that because I thought for sure, like, all right, these two are going to be great, and this one's going to be a piece of shit. But the fact that I did like, again, I'm not saying it was good by any means. There was a lot of bad stuff in it. I thought the comedy was not great, but a lot of admirable things in the movie that, at the end of the movie, I was like, all right, I low key fuck with that, So, there were a lot of parts of it that I enjoyed. So that was a good surprise. Matt, you don't get a punch. You are
you could just
spared a
knock them easy.
punch this time.
Unless you recommend the girls' trip, what's your movie?
I don't know yet. I really haven't decided. I'm in between a couple, but like, you know, I got to think about it a little bit more because I just kind of, well, Welcome Home Roscoe Jenkins I had already ready, but I don't have it this week.
Gotcha.
So
That's where if you want Jackson, or if you don't feel, just gonna say this, and you can black bar out my mouth and just put the title of the movie. But this week I choose. All right.
Well, what a wonderful choice, Sam. What a very engaging choice that you just made there. And my choice will also be, so there you go. That's what I have to say.
all
I'm
right.
excited for that.
And
No.
well, I gotta do mine. All
Oh.
right. So this week, my choice is
But yeah, I think we did it again, boys.
hell yeah. Good shit. Good
Good
shit.
shit. Good picks, and we'll see what happens next time.